to our top story, and the search continues for dozens of people still missing after a dam burst its banks in Kenya's Nakuru county. Thousands of people are homeless but lucky to be alive. CGTN's Peninah Karibe sat down with one survivor who escaped the floodwaters.
68-year-old Paul Mwangi is now homeless. The Patel Dam bursting its banks swept away his house along with the entire village. He's not returned to the place where his home once stood until now.
At
around 8 in the evening, I heard a loud bang. I thought it was just rain like we had witnessed earlier in the afternoon. I was alone in the house. I decided that when I finished my chores and have my dinner, I would go to bed. When I woke up, I found myself very far from my bed, buried up to my neck in mud. All around me, there was just water. I couldn't see the end of it. Another wave of water came in and pushed me free of the mud, carrying me to a shallower place. I felt around with my hands and realized I was touching grass.
Paul had only seconds to think of a way to save himself.
I crawled from the mud and the shallow water, holding on to some trees. There was debris all over me. Trees and broken homes were blocking my way, but I held on because I knew if I let go of the trees, I would be swept away. I finally managed to get out of the water and rushed to my neighbor. His house was not affected. Since I was sleeping when I was swept away, I arrived at my neighbor's naked. I asked for a shawl to cover myself. My neighbor washed me. My whole body was covered in mud. Everywhere, my eyes, my ears, my mouth. Even now I can still feel a bit of mud in my ears. I was later taken to hospital, where I stayed for 2 days.
This empty space accommodated 6 homesteads, all of those families very well known to Paul. When the waters came raging down that fateful Wednesday evening, everything was flattened. The ferocity of the water still evident on the trees around here. Most of Paul's neighbors died.
I am alive. God is great because he has saved me, and I will praise him my entire life.
A remarkable story of survival. But with thousands displaced by the flooding, Paul is one of many who have lost everything else. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, in Solai, Nakuru, Kenya.
Well, let's get you more now on that story. I'm joined live from Nakuru by Peninah Karibe. Peninah, with each passing day, the chances of finding survivors diminishes. How long are the search and rescue operations likely to continue?
Well, Karen, we heard from the local authorities. There was a press briefing at 1 p.m. local time. We asked that very question, and they said they will continue with the recovery efforts, and they wouldn't say up until when. Remember, Karen, we have a number of about 40 unaccounted for persons, and they say that they have a rough idea of where these people could be trapped under the debris, under all of the sludge of the mud. And so they say that they are planning to bring in sniffer dogs to help aid the military, which is conducting this exercise, to be able to identify where these bodies could be and pull them out. Remember, like you mentioned, days quickly passing, anxiety as well building up. Residents and family members here just feeling that they need closure and they need it quick. So they said they wouldn't put a definite time as to when they would close that down. But again, at 6 p.m. they said that they are planning to sort of scale down this process so that they can start with the other process of identification of the bodies. It's been a painful process, Karen, I can tell you that. 3 days after this tragedy happened, there's still family members that do not know where their loved ones are. There are those who know that they are in the mortuaries, but they haven't yet been able to go through that identification process. So there's a sense of urgency, at least from the local community here, that they should be picking up the pieces and moving on with their lives. And so authorities sort of saying they're cognizant of that fact and saying they're going to expedite the process, Karen.
And of course, more rains are expected in the region. What about the other dams? Are they safe at this stage?
Well, I remember when I last spoke to you, Karen, at around 10 GMT, I mentioned there was a planned media trip to these dams so we can have a clear understanding of what exactly happened. I can now tell you that trip didn't happen. There were no reasons given for its cancellation, but we did manage to speak to an engineer who went up and inspected that particular dam that broke its banks. He says it was constructed in a very poor manner. The laid out regulations were not followed, and really he says it wasn't a surprise or a shock that this happened. He says it's an eventuality that was expected really for anybody who saw that dam before it broke its banks. Now we understand in total there are 7 dams. He said, that engineer, that there were some planned trips to go and inspect the other 6 dams. But what we do know for a fact is that 2 dams were drained yesterday, and that exercise is continuing until all the other dams are drained. Now when we speak to the residents here, you sort of get that anxiety really, lots of jitters, because they say there was a river that was blocked and redirected to these dams by the farm owner. And you can imagine, Karen, now that we are in the middle of the long rain season, the catchment area of these dams, or for that river, there's lots of heavy rain there. So residents just wondering what's going to happen next in the next coming days. But authorities saying they are very keen to conduct investigations as well as inspections on the status of the other dams. And for those found culpable, they will be prosecuted.
And this particular bridge that caused all this damage, as you say, it was poorly built. The authorities say the owner did not have a permit to build this dam, but it was a large construction. How do you think that passed unnoticed? Who is at fault here?
That's a very good question, Karen. Every time you ask that question to somebody, there's, I should say, shifting of blame, really. Nobody really taking ownership. Now, we spoke to the local authorities here, and they said that several times they had made trips to that farm and asked the owner to regularize and have sort of a license from the Water Resources Management Authority called WAMA here. And they say that he didn't heed their advice. Now, of course, residents asking critical questions. You're the authorities. Why didn't you take action? Now, when you go to the owner says, at least from what we've heard in the previous statements he issued, they say that theirs was not an illegal process. They followed the law according to them. But I'll tell you something else, Karen, that we've realized speaking to residents. This man, the owner of this farm, is a very influential person. This is a person who's constructed administration buildings for the local government. He's constructed roads and hospitals and schools. And so there's not a lot of faith really from the residents here that authorities are going to take much action. They sort of feel like he's using his influence really to have his way. So lots of shifting blame here. Government, of course, saying they still will get to the bottom of that. But when you speak to the locals, not much faith that really they will see justice, Karen.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Peninah Karibe there, filing that report from Nakuru.